Alice in Art Gallery. Nowadays, visiting art galleries is literally considered to give a giant source of satisfaction. Paintings drawn on the picturesque canvas definitely consist of their particular plots, surrounded by significance, art and the personal point of view an artist. Alice is a great admirer of art. She is literally obsessed with visiting galleries. There, Alice usually walks around watching the masterpieces. When the maiden likes the painting, she sits in front of it and stays in the building of the gallery for hours. Not long ago, a brand new gallery was opened. Of course, Alice had quickly decided to book a